Tonight, before the sun rises tomorrow, countless seniors across the nation will retire for the evening with ankles significantly more swollen than they were this morning. The extensive health and retirement study, which has tracked older citizens for decades, revealed that roughly 20% of individuals past 50 reported swelling in their lower legs. Various vein specialists suggest the actual prevalence is even greater, estimating that nearly 40% of people over 50 endure some variation of this condition. Most individuals attribute it to the current weather, dietary sodium, or merely the natural aging process. I want to introduce you to an alternative perspective on this issue. This demonstrates exactly what occurs to your ankles between your mid-50s and mid-70s if no intervention takes place. This is not a hypothetical scenario. It is what typically transpires step by step, year after year, when the root origin remains unaddressed. The puffiness you can indent with your thumb this evening does not represent the conclusion of the issue. It is merely the opening chapter. Unfortunately, the subsequent chapters are the ones that nobody warns you about until it is too late. Here is the most critical piece of information you need to understand. A distinct window of opportunity exists where this entire progression can still be completely reversed. Prior to that window closing, a single week of targeted daily habits can yield visible and physical improvements. Once that window shuts, those identical habits offer substantially less benefit. Therefore, tonight I intend to accomplish two objectives. First, I will guide you through the year-by-year progression so you can identify your current status, and then I will provide the 7-day strategy designed to halt it. A standard medical consultation rarely permits the 20 minutes required to clarify this mechanism properly, so let me dedicate that time to you right now. Before we proceed, I should mention one brief detail. I have compiled the comprehensive version of this methodology into a concise manual titled The Drainage Protocol. The strategy outlined in this video represents the initial week, which is sufficient to experience a physical shift, whereas the manual contains the full system, including the long-term reset, fluid-moving foods, daily schedules, and tracking templates. If you are interested, the link is placed in the description below, and that is the only time I will reference it. Now let us refocus on your ankles by starting precisely where you are situated right now. It is the conclusion of a typical day, and as you remove your footwear or slide off your socks, you notice a deep impression left in your skin by the elastic band.
You press a fingertip into the soft tissue just above the ankle bone, and for a brief moment, an indentation remains, resembling a fingerprint pressed into raw dough before it gradually fills back in. You have likely created a personal narrative to rationalize this occurrence, which usually sounds like, "I consumed too many liquids with dinner," "I remained seated for too long today," "The temperature outside is high," or "I am simply getting older." Here is the straightforward reality. Every single one of those rationalizations contains a small element of truth, meaning they are not foolish, but they are undeniably incomplete. The water you consume does not drive this process, as your body is exceptionally proficient at managing fluid intake, directing excess to the kidneys for elimination within a matter of hours. Sodium certainly plays a role, but it acts as a passenger rather than the driver of this issue. Furthermore, advancing age is not an actual cause. It functions like a stopwatch that merely records how long a quiet mechanical malfunction has been permitted to operate. If fluid intake, sodium, and aging are not the primary culprits, what is the actual mechanism driving this? Let me illustrate this with a visual concept that will permanently change how you view your lower legs. Picture a canal designed to transport water uphill against the continuous force of gravity, which is an inherently difficult task. To accomplish this, the canal cannot allow the water to remain stagnant. It utilizes a series of locks, which are chambers equipped with gates at both ends. Water enters the chamber, the lower gate seals to prevent backflow, and the fluid is then elevated to the subsequent chamber all the way to the destination. Your leg veins function exactly like that canal system. Every time your heart circulates blood down to your feet, that same volume must journey all the way back up to your chest against gravity the entire time. Because your veins cannot accomplish this feat autonomously, they depend on two specific mechanisms to assist them. The first mechanism consists of the gates, which are tiny, one-way internal valves within your leg veins that open to permit upward blood flow and immediately snap shut to prevent backward slippage. These serve as your lock gates. The second mechanism is the actual pump responsible for lifting the fluid, and this is the vital piece of information that is rarely shared. This pump is not an internal machine, nor is it your heart, it is your calf muscle. Every time you take a step or flex your foot, your calf muscle compresses the deep veins nestled inside it, forcing blood upward through those internal gates. Specialists who study human circulation frequently refer to the calf as the body's secondary pump, and some even label it a second heart. When you walk, your legs actively pump blood, but when you sit still, that secondary heart is effectively deactivated, causing the canal to fall silent. There is an additional component to this canal network that becomes crucial in later stages. Running parallel to your veins is a secondary, finer network known as your lymphatic vessels, which you can conceptualize as the canal's overflow drainage channels. When small amounts of fluid escape from the tiniest blood vessels into the surrounding tissue, these lymphatic pathways are responsible for absorbing and clearing it away like a cleanup crew. Just like the rest of this system, these channels operate at a much slower pace when your physical movement decreases. Keep this entire mental image in mind, the gates, the pump, and the overflow drains, because the progressive timeline I'm about to detail is simply one phenomenon occurring in slow motion, the lock system losing its functional rhythm. You might wonder why this condition develops gradually over decades instead of manifesting all at once, which is an excellent question with 3 specific explanations. First, the pump itself experiences a gradual decline in strength because after age 50, most individuals naturally lose muscle mass, including in the calves, a medical condition known as sarcopenia. A smaller calf translates to a weaker pump that displaces less blood with each step. Second, the vein walls themselves gradually lose their structural elasticity. A young vein immediately snaps back into its original shape. An older vein remains slightly distended for a longer duration after each volume of blood passes through it. Third, the internal gates simply accumulate wear and tear from decades of continuous operation and pressure, causing the delicate flaps that once sealed perfectly to close with less precision. None of these 3 shifts is dramatic on its own, which is the exact deception of the condition. Each change is gradual and nearly imperceptible, but combined, they compromise the entire system. That is why a body that drained fluid effortlessly at 40 requires assistance at 65, not due to a sudden failure, but because 3 minor factors drifted simultaneously. The encouraging news embedded within this process is that you possess direct influence over the most critical factor of the 3, the pump itself. Stage 1 represents your current situation this evening, where your internal gates and muscular pump remain operational, but you are providing that pump with fewer opportunities to function. A day spent predominantly sitting at a desk, in a vehicle, or watching television means the calf pump rarely engages, causing blood to ascend sluggishly while fluid accumulates in the lower extremities. By nighttime, the pressure within the veins near your ankles rises, forcing a small amount of fluid out of the microscopic vessels into the surrounding tissue, creating the puffiness and the indentation that retains your thumbprint. The hidden benefit of stage 1 is that it remains almost entirely reversible. When you lie down at night, gravity ceases to oppose your circulation, the pump finally catches up, the overflow drains clear the tissue, and by morning the swelling has completely vanished, returning your ankles to normal. This overnight recovery is the single most vital indicator in this entire discussion, so remember this principle. Swelling that develops by evening and disappears by morning signifies an early stage. This early phase is precisely the point at which the body responds most rapidly to intervention. To determine exactly where you stand right now, you can perform a simple 10-second self-assessment. Press your thumb firmly but gently into the soft tissue just above your ankle bone, maintain the pressure for approximately 5 seconds, and then lift it away. If a distinct indentation remains and slowly fills back in, clinicians refer to this as pitting edema, which represents fluid in the tissue being displaced and taking time to redistribute. The longer that mark lingers, the more fluid has accumulated there, whereas if no indentation occurs, you are likely in an even earlier phase. This is an indicator rather than a formal diagnosis, serving as an easy method to identify your current chapter. There is a second, even simpler clue you can use by asking yourself a single question: is the swelling gone by morning? If your ankles are puffy at night but completely normal upon waking, it confirms your internal gates are still sealing properly and your overflow drains are successfully managing the volume overnight, which is the most positive sign possible. In this initial stage, you will notice a sensation of heavy limbs more than visible swelling, along with legs that ache by mid-afternoon and a distinct fatigue in the calves unrelated to your walking distance. What you will not experience yet is any alteration to the skin, which remains healthy, pliable, and its natural color. Remember this detail because skin alterations are precisely what define the next chapter. Let us advance the timeline forward to stage 2, which typically occurs roughly 12 to 18 months down the road if the muscular pump remains inactive and no intervention halts the progression. At this point, the internal gates begin to fail under the continuous pressure of pooling blood, stretching the delicate vein walls until they are too far apart to seal entirely. Consequently, when blood attempts to ascend, a portion of it slips backward through the compromised gate, a phenomenon known medically as venous reflux. You can visualize this as a canal lock gate that is warped just enough to leak fluid continuously. The reason a single leak is so detrimental is that it forces the chamber directly below it to handle an increased volume of water at higher pressure, which pushes harder against that lower gate, causing it to warp and leak as well. The process feeds on itself, causing the pressure in your lower veins to climb higher and remain elevated for a greater portion of the day. As a result, the swelling that previously vanished overnight now persists into the morning, meaning you wake up with ankles that are not quite normal, and they become puffy again by noon. The daily window of normal appearance grows progressively shorter as the overnight reset begins to disappear. This is also the phase where the indentation from your footwear ceases to be a temporary mark. The skin surrounding your ankle reacts to sitting in high-pressure fluid for months, often causing it to become itchy in the evenings or develop a faint brownish discoloration near the inside of the ankle bone where pressure is greatest. This coloration is not a typical bruise or surface dirt. It is an iron stain caused by red blood cells leaking from overloaded vessels and breaking down in the tissue, much like rust spreading along the base of an old pipe. Clinicians identify this as the onset of stasis dermatitis or skin changes. You will likely notice these changes in subtle, everyday ways before observing them clearly in a mirror. Shoes that fit comfortably in the morning will feel restrictive by late afternoon, and the indentation from your socks takes a considerable amount of time to vanish at night. You will find yourself instinctively wanting to elevate your feet, not because of external advice, but because your lower legs simply feel more comfortable in that position. Your body is already requesting the exact intervention this strategy provides, so listen to that valid physical instinct. This brings us to a major myth versus reality moment regarding this specific stage. The prevailing myth is that a diuretic or water pill is the ultimate solution, operating on the logic that if the legs contain excess fluid, you simply need to flush it out. The reality is far more honest. For swelling caused by leaking gates and an inactive muscular pump, diuretics frequently yield disappointing results. They can do very little for fluid that has been left stagnant in the tissue by slowed overflow drains because they target a symptom while the mechanical gates continue to leak. Because the root cause here is structural and mechanical, the actual solution must be mechanical as well, as a pill cannot strengthen a muscular pump. While stage 2 is still highly manageable, the skin discoloration can still fade and the gates are leaking rather than destroyed, you can clearly perceive the trajectory now. It has progressed beyond simple evening fatigue into legs that are visibly altering during daylight hours. Stage 3 represents the specific chapter I want to ensure you never experience. Imagine the timeline advanced to approximately 5 years without any intervention to disrupt the continuous decline. By this point, the pressure within those lower veins has remained elevated for so long that the surrounding tissue begins to alter its fundamental character. The brownish discoloration has expanded and darkened, and the skin that was once soft and pliable begins to indurate, feeling tight and firm around the lower leg as if a restrictive band of leather were embedded beneath the surface. Clinicians utilize complex terminology for this hardening, but the plain explanation is that tissue exposed to chronic swelling and deprived of healthy circulation for years becomes rigid, inflamed, and scarred. Returning to the canal analogy, a lock system that leaks for years does not do so quietly. The constant overflow erodes the structural walls of the chamber until the foundation itself begins to degrade.
This structural degradation is exactly what happens to your skin during the third stage, and it matters immensely because hardened, oxygen-deprived skin is incredibly fragile. A minor abrasion that would typically heal within a week on a healthy limb can easily transform into a persistent sore that lingers for months. In the most advanced presentation of this stage, that compromised skin can break down into an open wound known as a venous leg ulcer. While not everyone develops these, they are far from uncommon, affecting roughly 1 to 2 out of every 100 adults over the age of 50. Once these open wounds manifest, they are notoriously stubborn, healing at a very slow pace and demonstrating a high tendency to recur. A consensus published by vascular surgeons back in 2004 detailed this exact progression, moving from simple edema to skin pigmentation, tissue hardening, and ultimately to healed or active ulcerations as a single continuous disease process rather than separate issues. I am not sharing this information to alarm you, but rather because few people connect these stages explicitly. The puffy ankle in your 50s and the persistent ulcer in your 70s are not distinct medical problems. They are the exact same issue observed 5 years apart after being allowed to run unchecked. To summarize the timeline, Stage 1 involves swelling that completely clears by morning. Stage 2 features lingering swelling and skin discoloration. Stage 3 presents tissue hardening and structural fragility. Now let us focus on the pivotal turning point that alters this entire narrative, the specific window where you can actively intervene. Every single stage I just outlined depends entirely on one factor remaining broken, the muscular pump staying deactivated. Let us trace the causal chain backward together. The tissue hardens because pressure remained elevated. The pressure stayed high because the gates leaked. The gates leaked because they were stretched by pooled blood. The blood pooled because the calf pump was not clearing the veins, and the calf pump failed to clear the veins because the legs remained stationary for most hours of the day. Consequently, the single most influential lever in this entire progression is not a pharmaceutical medication, a topical cream, or an oral supplement. It is movement. Specifically, it requires deliberate, targeted movement of the exact muscle group that powers the entire canal network. This is your point of interruption, which is widest during stage 1, still accessible during stage 2, and significantly narrower by the time you reach stage 3. In the earlier phases, the internal gates are merely stretched rather than destroyed. If you lower the pressure and reactivate the pump, those gates receive a genuine opportunity to seal properly again, allowing fluid to drain and skin to recover. If you wait until the gates are structurally ruined and the tissue has permanently hardened, you can still achieve improvements, but you can no longer completely reverse the damage. This is the honest explanation for why achieving a visible change within a week is entirely realistic for some individuals, but not for others. The earlier you are situated on this structural timeline, the faster the daily habits will produce results. If your swelling still resolves completely by morning, you are currently positioned in the most favorable part of that window this evening.
Furthermore, there is a quiet physiological benefit to this movement that is rarely discussed. Remember the overflow drains, the lymphatic channels that clear away stray tissue fluid, possess no independent pumping mechanism of their own. They depend almost entirely on the mechanical squeezing and releasing of the surrounding skeletal muscles to move fluid. Therefore, every single ankle flex you perform activates two distinct systems simultaneously. You are draining the main venous canal and stimulating the secondary cleanup crew in a single motion. That is the reason such a tiny, unglamorous habit can produce such substantial results. If this mechanism makes intuitive sense to you, please subscribe to the channel. These physiological timelines directly intersect, and our subsequent broadcast will resume precisely where this breakdown concludes. Let us outline the 7-day initial strategy, which is designed entirely around a single core objective: reactivate the muscular pump, lower the internal pressure, and allow the venous gates to rest. Nothing within this routine involves expensive equipment or specialized products. Allow me to guide you through the protocol step by step. The first step executes the vast majority of the mechanical clearance, so please take it seriously despite its apparent simplicity. Every single hour that you remain seated, execute 10 slow, deliberate ankle pumps. Point your toes completely down away from your body, then pull them back up tightly toward your shins. Ensure the motion is slow and utilizes your full range of motion. This is not a strenuous workout. It is simply toggling the mechanical switch to turn the pump back on. Each time you pull your toes upward, your calf muscle compresses the deep veins, driving a standard volume of blood up through the internal gates to empty the canal. Set a digital reminder on your phone if necessary to maintain this baseline all day long, as this single adjustment alters local fluid pressure more than any other tool listed. The second step is to incorporate a brief walk immediately following your meals. Aim for a quick 5-minute walk after each major meal, totaling 3 short intervals across the span of your day. You are not doing this for cardiovascular conditioning or weight management, though it certainly benefits both. You're doing it because walking represents the calf pump operating at peak efficiency. Every single step, actively primes and empties those lower vessels. If 5 minutes feels too demanding initially, start with 2 minutes and gradually increase the duration, focusing entirely on consistent rhythm rather than total distance. The third step physically positions gravity on your side rather than allowing it to continuously oppose your circulation. 2 or 3 times each day, lie down flat and elevate your legs so your ankles rest above the level of your heart for approximately 15 minutes. A few standard cushions positioned beneath your calves will achieve this perfectly without the need for specialized equipment. When your ankles are positioned higher than your chest, gravity allows pooled fluid to drain naturally back toward your torso, causing pressure in the lower veins to drop. However, historical clinical advice requires a vital modern correction. Elevation alone is fundamentally insufficient because lying completely still leaves the muscular pump deactivated. Combining elevation with active foot movement is the exact pairing that yields results, so never deploy them in isolation. The fourth step addresses the hours spent in between your active windows. The quiet structural damage typically occurs when sitting with your feet dependent for long, uninterrupted blocks of time. Aim to never sit for longer than an hour without standing up, even if it is only for a brief 30 seconds to perform a few ankle pumps before sitting back down. Additionally, when you are seated, avoid crossing your legs tightly at the knee for extended periods, as this physically pinches the very vessels you are trying to drain. The fifth step involves managing your sodium intake with total practical honesty. You do not require a flawless diet this week. You simply need to identify the top 2 or 3 largest sources of sodium in your current routine and reduce those specifically. The primary culprit is rarely the table salt shaker. It is almost always hidden in ultra-processed foods, canned items, deli meats, or restaurant meals. Excess sodium causes your body to retain additional water volume, which naturally settles exactly where vascular pressure is already highest. Aim for a noticeable reduction rather than zero intake. The sixth step demands absolute caution, so please listen attentively before proceeding: compression therapies. A properly fitted compression stocking applied first thing in the morning before swelling begins and worn throughout the day provides external structural support to your veins and enhances the efficiency of the muscular calf pump. While it offers a very visible difference for many, you must be careful. If you experience peripheral artery disease, diabetes, or localized neuropathy in your feet, incorrect compression can cause physical harm. Therefore, always clear this specific step with your healthcare provider before implementing it. One critical warning while we are discussing this topic: because I hear this bad advice constantly, do not attempt to resolve lower extremity swelling by intentionally restricting your water intake. This common approach completely backfires. When you deprive your body of adequate hydration, its natural survival response is to hold on to existing sodium and fluid even more aggressively, causing the swelling to intensify rather than diminish. Your body processes normal water intake perfectly well. The swelling is a structural mechanical issue rather than a sign that you drank too much fluid. Maintain your regular healthy hydration habits and allow the physical movement and sodium reduction to manage the fluid clearance. To summarize your upcoming week, perform 10 ankle pumps every hour you are seated, take a brief walk after each meal, elevate your legs above your heart 2 or 3 times daily, stand and move at least once per hour, trim your top 2 or 3 salt sources, and implement compression stockings only under professional medical guidance. 6 subtle habits, none of them dramatic on their own, yet all targeting the exact same vascular network. Regarding what you should realistically expect from this routine, the phase that responds first and most rapidly is stage 1. Evening puffiness that typically disappears by morning can begin showing positive changes within a few days, resulting in ankles that feel noticeably lighter and less restricted within a single week, along with shallower sock lines and more comfortable footwear by nightfall. For early stage swelling, that 1-week turnaround is a completely achievable goal. What responds at a much slower pace is chronic skin pigmentation. If you already display that brownish iron staining, the coloration can lighten, but it fades over a course of weeks and months rather than days because iron deposits require substantial time to be reabsorbed by the body. Be patient with this process, as gradual fading still represents active tissue healing. A highly encouraging sign to watch for during the first 2 weeks is the return of your overnight reset. If your swelling had begun to linger into the morning but now disappears completely by breakfast. After starting this routine, it confirms the local vascular pressure is dropping and your internal gates are successfully resting. When that morning baseline returns, you know with absolute certainty that you caught this condition while the window of opportunity remained open. Conversely, you must understand what this plan cannot accomplish, and I need to state this directly. It will not structurally rebuild an internal valve that has already been destroyed, it cannot heal an active open wound on its own, and it is never a substitute for professional medical care if an underlying systemic condition is driving your symptoms. Hardened tissue and active ulcers require hands-on clinical intervention. This routine can successfully lower localized pressure and slow down the progressive decline, but it cannot reverse time on tissue that has already sustained scarring, which is why early intervention is absolutely paramount. This brings me to the critical portion of this discussion that I will not permit you to skip past. While most lower extremity swelling in older adults follows the slow mechanical progression detailed above, there are specific presentations that indicate a serious underlying medical issue. You must seek immediate same-day medical attention if you experience any of the following warning signs. If only one leg suddenly swells, becomes painful, warm to the touch, or displays redness, do not wait and do not massage the limb, as this can indicate a deep vein blood clot requiring urgent evaluation. This specific scenario is not a situation where you watch and wait. If both of your legs swell and you simultaneously experience shortness of breath, particularly when lying flat, or if you experience a sudden weight gain of several pounds within just a few days, that clinical combination points toward cardiovascular strain and requires prompt evaluation by a physician. If the lower extremity edema presents alongside a sharp decrease in your daily urine output, or if you notice a distinct yellowing of your skin or the whites of your eyes, those flags point directly toward kidney or liver dysfunction and necessitate a medical consultation in the near future. If the skin has already broken open, or if there is a localized lesion that is weeping fluid or refusing to heal, that requires hands-on professional wound care rather than a domestic routine. Furthermore, if your ankle swelling initiated shortly after you started a new blood pressure medication or had your dosage increased, specifically a category known as calcium channel blockers, the swelling may be a direct pharmacological side effect rather than an intrinsic vein issue.
Research published in the journal Hypertension demonstrates that these medications can dilate small peripheral arteries without matching dilatation in the venous side, increasing capillary pressure and forcing fluid into the surrounding tissue. This specific side effect occurs more frequently in female patients than male patients, showing up in roughly 15% of women compared to about 6% of men according to manufacturer data. However, there is an absolute rule with zero exceptions. You must never discontinue or alter a prescribed blood pressure medication on your own. Inform the physician who prescribed it about the swelling and allow them to manage any potential adjustments, as alternative therapeutic options are frequently available. None of the insights shared tonight constitute a formal medical diagnosis, as it is impossible to evaluate your physical condition through a screen. View this information as a comprehensive structural explanation you can take with you to your next medical appointment, enabling you to understand the underlying machinery and ask your clinician highly targeted questions. Before you close this video, please perform one small task for me. Let me know which decade of life you are currently navigating. Are you in your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, or beyond that milestone? Please leave that number in the comments section below. I ask because this physiological timeline shifts based on your current age, meaning the window of opportunity is wider for some individuals than others, and your responses indicate exactly who I should build the next deep dive video for. Puffy ankles are not a simple reflection of your liquid intake or a mandatory consequence of your age. They represent a vascular canal system where the primary pump has been left stationary and the internal gates are waiting to see if you will provide them with a physical reason to seal effectively again. The swelling you can indent with your thumb tonight is the earliest version of this condition you will ever experience, meaning it is the phase that answers quickest. Activate the calf pump tomorrow morning with 10 consistent ankle pumps, take a short walk after breakfast, and elevate your legs before sleep. These small, unglamorous, repetitive movements are exactly how a quiet canal system gets moving again.